Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. This is Chrissy Raywalk, Director of Intercollegiate Athletics at the University of Delaware. One of the things that I appreciate and enjoy most about leadership is that it's a journey, not a destination. It involves lots of different twists and turns, and you need many different types of people to go along with you on your journey in order for it to be successful. So today, I invite you to start your leadership journey with this podcast. Enjoy.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at 1Q Leadership. This episode will be guest hosted by Diana Curdy. Diana is the Director of Marketing and Membership at Wakefield Research Partners. She has a background in sponsorship, sales, and activation. So without further ado, take it away, Diana.
Welcome into the One Question Leadership Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm your guest host, Diana Curdy with Wakefield Research Partners, and today I'll be speaking with Vince Thompson. Vince is the founder, chairman, and CEO of Melt. And for the last 20 years, Vince has grown and established Melt as one of the nation's leading sports, culinary, and entertainment marketing agencies, focused on brand development, event and experiential marketing, social media, and sponsorship strategies. So they really have their hands in a variety of industries. One event that you'll recognize that they're heavily involved in is the NCAA Final Four, and we'll touch on that a little bit today as well. Vince, we're excited to have you on today for this conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, thank you so much. It's always an honor to join you guys.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, you guys are in a variety of industries. I'd like to focus in a little bit and talk about COVID-19, the effects it's having on the sports industry in particular. There's a lot of dynamics, a lot of things in the air, and things are evolving and changing. So going back to the Final Four, that's one of the most visible projects that you guys are involved in on an annual basis. And really the timing of the pandemic, the Final Four was one of the first major events that was really impacted on that. So required a lot of adjustment in real time. So could you tell us a little bit how you adjusted your business model to ensure that really high quality of service to your clients during the course of the pandemic, and really just how you worked with them through that process as you were getting information and learning to adjust as that was unfolding?
I think it's a time that, first of all, I'll never forget for sure. The Final Four, we were heading into our 18th Final Four activation on behalf of the Coca-Cola Company, believe it or not, had over 150 people ready to deploy, passing out thousands of samples and hundreds of events throughout the city. And it's always a even more special time for us because this one was in Atlanta, and it's, kind of like a homecoming and a victory lap. And then literally, I never forget March 13th, on Friday the 13th, the rugs just started, the record player kind of scratched just, immediately. First, you had, a high level of uncertainty because the conference tournaments were being canceled, which, obviously dominoed and cascaded into March Madness, which, a lot of your listeners may not know that other than the Super Bowl, those 3 weeks have more viewer eyeballs and ad dollars, and obviously the millions filling out the bracket. So it's it's the beginning of spring, and then you segue into the Masters, and obviously spring is, other than the NFL and college football, is the busiest time of the year for sports. And so literally it was a triage mode, because not only were we, this thing was changing by the hour, we were flying by the seat of our pants, but, we had, millions of dollars in deposits and hotels and, vendors and suppliers flying in. And I mean, it's a massive operation. And then, the music stopped. And so I had been following some of the news reports early on of the virus and had been keeping my eye on it. But, no different than sort of like, hey, there's a flu going around or something like that. But I had been kind of eyeballing it for a while, and it felt in the back of my mind. I'm like, we might need, just some contingency plans just in case. But so then, we had teams. Not only, we were going to have them deployed in Nashville for the SEC tournament. Then we would have teams throughout the NCAA regionals. Then we would have obviously a massive team at the Final Four. But then we turn around. We would have been activating NBA, rodeo, NASCAR, MLB, MLS, Masters, PGA, a couple of major food and music festivals. I mean, it was pretty amazing period, and it was all unfolding in real time. So, I might go from talking to a high level supplier, do we fly in, do we not fly in, then on the phone with the president of Coca-Cola. What do we do? I mean, it was crazy, and frankly, we're still sort of trying to uncover and clean it all up, as all of my other colleagues in the industry, in the services and agency world are. But we lost millions of dollars in revenue in literally 1 week, and so internally, we had to make a lot of tough decisions that would allow us to survive and sustain long term. And the other thing is that nobody really knew how long this was going to last, and really in our minds we thought, well, maybe we'll be through this by Memorial Day. So we're like, all right, we can batten it down for a couple of months. But I don't think anybody would have forecast that this thing would still be roaring out into, I mean, now it's August, and with no end in sight. And if you don't have college football and NFL football, but if you don't have college football, it's going to be devastating on the impact of colleges and college athletic directors and athletic departments. But it's going to have a massive impact on the entire business model of college football and college sports. And I don't think any of us really even know that yet.
Yeah. And something I've heard in the industry previously is some of those best relationships, you don't want to have to go to that contract, right? You leave it in the drawer, and it's built on that relationship and open communication and having that trust. And so going back to what you were sharing a little bit about how this process has unfolded in real time, it's unpredictable. We don't know when it's going to end. You're dealing with so many different types of relationships, and you're having to advocate on behalf of many different roles and many different players. So if you could speak to that a little bit, how you're managing the impact of, okay, I have to work with my brand partners in one way, but then I also need to have conversations with, let's just put it in the college space, the university in one way, the league, the multimedia rights holder. Those are all different dynamics and different conversations. Could you expand on that a little bit, on how you're managing those from a leadership standpoint?
I'll give you, a couple of examples. We represent AFLAC, and so we've been working with them for months now, role playing and devising different strategies against different scenarios if and when SEC so I'll take it down the chain. So we're working internally with AFLAC, devising all these different strategies. Then they have a sponsorship agreement, official supplemental provider of the SEC. So then you've got the elements of that contract. And then ESPN owns all the rights to the SEC trademarks, and they have the SEC Network and the SEC Games and SEC Nation and Paul Feinbaum and all of that. So then you've got to work with the conference, and then you've got to separately work with ESPN, and then we have a separate agreement with Coach Saban. And then we have a separate agreement with University of Alabama, but then their rights holder is Learfield IMG. So then you got to work on that. And then all the while you've got to continue to develop the strategy, and then the creative and the messaging strategy against if and when there are games or there are not games. And then so I kind of liken it to navigating a bill through Congress, and it's not against any specific set of circumstances, because the circumstances change every hour or every day. So there'll be a lot of stress tests, as I call them, in these relationships, and it'll go well and above and beyond the contractual stress tests. But if there is no college football in the fall, I mean, those stress tests will be absolutely tested to the limit. I can promise you that.
Wow. I mean, what a great comparison of trying to get a bill through Congress with all the dynamics and checkpoints that you've got to pass through, but knowing that it's a moving target and we're still not totally sure where we're going to end up and when the smoke will really clear. So I'm interested to hear a little bit about more of the internal side too for Melt as an organization, where you've created such a great reputation in the industry for developing really great talent, having great leadership to advise on all these different areas. So how, and you spoke a little bit about having to make some tough decisions in those regards too. So how has that internal dialogue and development of your staff and your team members, how have you encouraged them and helped put them in a position to succeed in a time where it is just so unpredictable?
Well, I mean, and I use the word, it's cliche, it's uncharted, waters, uncharted territory, but it's been complicated. And first of all, we produce 1,000 events a year. So there are no events right now, particularly, other than, the bubbles and the things of that nature. But that obviously doesn't lend itself to any form of event marketing. There are no live scale music or food festivals, anything of that nature. So, and then you go from your peak revenue season, other than college football for us, and you go to zero. The first thing we had to identify is like, okay, if there's anything, frivolous within the organization, we're going to have to cut that right now. And when things are kind of rocking and rolling and you have, frivolous things within the organization, you kind of let them slide or kind of let them go because you're so busy focused on the big picture and much larger deals going on. But then, when you get into this, where you literally nearly zero in revenue, other than the planning and the fees and the strategy and all that. So you had to make some tough choices there. And then secondly, you got to think about this: is that our clients' budgets are under duress as well. Some of their jobs have been under duress and furloughed. I mean, IHG is a big hotel company, a big client of ours, and they furloughed more than 60% of their workforce. Another healthcare organization we represent, they've lost tens of millions of dollars because the elective surgeries, kind of went away and still have gone away. But so, we identified the immediate area that we could trim. My gut said, let's don't do this in dribs and drabs. Let's just go ahead and furlough as many people as we think we have to and get down to the core, knowing we didn't know how long it was going to take us to get through this. And we're still not through it now. So, but we tried to do the right thing with our people, even if we furloughed them. There's all types of intricate rules of furloughs versus termination and all those types of things. And so we got a great employment attorney, and we said, look, we want to make sure we take care of our people, but allow them to get as many of the benefits from the government as they can as well. So you had the emotional fallout that you were dealing with your employees and clients. And then we had 40 college students coming in for the summer. We had this amazing intern program, amazing speakers and guests and all that. And we had 300 applications, and all of a sudden I'm just getting blown up all over the country. Like, hey, what are we going to do? And can we come into Atlanta? And I sort of in the back of my mind, I knew that we weren't going to be able to physically host anybody. So then we scrambled. And fortunately, we've got expertise in the area, but we said, hey, look, let's take this thing virtual. Let's try to get as many kids as we could in this thing. Set it up for course credit. Wound up having 1,000 kids in, and I started hosting these career development podcasts with great industry leaders such as Reese Davis of ESPN, David Pollack, Tracy Wilson of CBS, and Craig Sankey of the SEC, and so many others. And then I'm like, well, I've got some time. I've always wanted to write a book about helping kids build a personal brand. So we started teaching that online. And so it's certainly been I thought I had survived and experienced and seen it all, but this has been a whole new ball game.
Yeah. And to give our listeners a little bit more context, you were talking about Melt University. So you guys have an internal development program for people looking to get into sports and entertainment, as both an educational and a networking opportunity for them to learn and grow. And it's now shifted to be online and digital. So kind of carrying that over. So you're doing an online company for the first time. Now this learning is going online. I mean, looking into that crystal ball, how do you see how much of this is going to stick the way that it stands now? And, what are the things of this time that you think are really going to carry forward and almost become our new normal? And then the other side of that question, specific to Melt University, what are some of the pillars of that program that you've looked back on and you're just saying, wow, this is really standing the test of time. This is relevant even now when things are so different than what we're used to seeing?
There's two parts of that question. Is that we're trying to, from our core business, we're really trying to rethink what that is. And so one side of it, you're going to have events again, and they're going to be, be vaccine and hopefully be vaccine. And so those events will return, our core business will return. And then now we're able to say, okay, do we have the right talent in the organization? Do we want to retool the talent? Do we want to add on or acquire additional set of services? Is it safety? Is it event analytics? Is it, a different way to negotiate sponsorship deals? And then the second piece of that is that, and this is why it's kind of been a beautiful segue, is that in the college landscape, the name, image, and likeness, obviously in some form is going to be full born in January. And so our core organization, our core business lends itself well to that because we're already working in college campuses and universities and athletic departments and student athletes. And then so in unwittingly, the Melt University program is going to lend itself a very natural segue into helping student athletes and athletic departments build their own personal brands. And there's some SaaS companies that are doing it really well, Influencer and Open Doors. But the one thing that we have that others don't have is those relationships with major clients like the Coca-Cola Company and the CMOs and CEOs of these organizations. So that'll be a natural segue. And then I think Melt U is actually going to evolve into its own business line. As I said, we've got a book coming out. I'm being asked to come lecture at colleges and student athletic departments. We're going to continue the podcast because there's so many great guests, in the can. I've already taped 50. The book hits in the middle of September. I think a lot of corporations will say, hey, help us navigate this generation post-COVID, help us set up virtual internships. And then the other thing is that what's going to happen in the job marketplace is going to be a buyer's market or depressed because, there's so many unemployed, experienced people that are willing to take lower and lesser jobs just to get back into the job market. And so you're going to have a whole nother area of career development, career coaching, career counseling within the college athletic, marketplace by talking to some of these great ADs and some of that, Alan Green at Auburn, Ross Bjork at Texas A&M, Greg McGarity at Georgia, uncovering, hey, mental health is going to be a growing industry within athletic departments, the content creation and name, image, and likeness, and obviously the fan experience, the analytics, data analytics, the compliance of the NIL. So, in a weird way, it allowed me to get off the hamster wheel running this giant company and kind of step back for myself and for the organization and say, hey, what do we want to do next? Because society had their hand forced. It's not like we lost some giant piece of business. It's like everybody has had their hand forced and everybody's kind of having to have the same conversations.
Yeah, I mean, my big takeaway from what you were just saying is that you can either embrace change or you can be resistant to it. And sometimes it's dealt to us without much of a choice and it will force you to stop in your tracks. But you can either take it and run with it, figure out what you need to do to keep going, or you can let it stop you. So I think that's awesome to hear that you guys are starting to think creatively about different areas of the business that can grow and how you can develop those young new team members that are coming in, which
I got one quote that you need to share with your listeners, and it's really apropos now that I live by, is that change is inevitable, growth is optional, choose wisely. And so that is a big, 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 big time one for all of us because we're certainly living in a gargantuan world of change. And you have to choose whether you want to grow through that change or not.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. And I think it's where you see the best talent, the most creative ideas, and people come out of those situations as well. So even though it's a little overwhelming and daunting, especially to be in something that we just have so little previous experience to compare to, it really does provide that awesome opportunity to do something different.
It's actually been amazing. But I think for young people, obviously, it's the first hard test they've had in their generation, their time in life. But secondly, they are the most sophisticated consumers in the world with social media and technology and all that. And I think you're going to see some fascinating things come out of it.
So as we're wrapping up here, would you mind just sharing with our listeners what are some of the areas that they can find more information on you, on Melt, if they want to follow up on some of the things that we talked about today?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Our website is meltatl.com, meltatl.com. We also have a heavy presence on social media, Melt ATL, Melt U, and then my handles are at Vinny Inc. VINNYINC. That's my old college nickname. I've been a hustler and an entrepreneur for since I first stepped on the foot of Auburn University 40 years ago. Worked my way through in Auburn sports information, and so and we will, like I said, we're going to continue to evolve our core business, and we're going to continue to evolve. Reaching out and really helping the next generation of sports and event marketers.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Vince. I really enjoyed the conversation. You just provide some really great insight on just a very challenging time in a pretty complex industry. So I really appreciate it. And just to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of the One Question Leadership podcast. And make sure that you're following us on Twitter. It's at 1Q Leadership. And then subscribe to that podcast wherever you get those. So Apple, Spotify, wherever it may be, so you never miss an episode. We'll catch you all for the next conversation. Thank you so much.
This episode of the One Question Leadership podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.